Smallpox. Smallpox was the original nightmare. This virus did not just make people sick, it left them with high fevers, painful sores, and a body that looked like it had been through a war zone. For thousands of years, people had no idea what was hitting them, and whole cities could get wrecked like a house of cards in a storm. Experts believe smallpox killed hundreds of millions of people across history, and for a long time, it was one of the biggest killers on Earth. The crazy part is that it was finally wiped out by a vaccine, which is one of the biggest wins in human history. Smallpox basically went from, "I own the planet," to "locked in the museum." That is the kind of L story that viruses do not enjoy. Flu. Now let us talk about the flu, but not the normal kind that ruins your weekend and makes you hug a blanket like it is your last friend on Earth. The 1918 flu was different. It spread fast, hit hard, and killed an estimated 50 million people, with some estimates even higher. It struck young adults especially hard, which was wild because that is usually the group with the best chance to fight back. People got sick, their lungs filled up, and doctors were often helpless. Imagine a virus so good at moving that it turned the whole world into a giant group chat where everybody was getting the same bad message at once. The flu still kills people today, but the 1918 pandemic was the boss level. HIV. HIV changed the world in a different way. It did not blow through populations all at once like some movie monster. It moved quietly, slowly, and took advantage of people before they even knew what was happening. HIV attacks the immune system, which is the body's defense team. Once that team gets weak, other infections can move in like a bunch of uninvited guests. Since the start of the epidemic, HIV and AIDS have killed more than 40 million people worldwide. That is not just a health crisis, that is a full-on human tragedy. The good news is that medicine has made huge progress, and many people with HIV can now live long lives with treatment. But this virus still matters a lot because it showed the world that a tiny thing you cannot even see can change everything. Rabies. Rabies is one of the scariest viruses ever because once the symptoms start, it is almost always deadly. That alone puts it in a special horror category. It spreads through the bite of infected animals, and at first, it can look harmless enough. Then the virus reaches the brain, and things get very bad very fast. The person can get confused, scared, and unable to swallow. In the end, rabies almost never gives second chances. That is why this virus has haunted humans for so long. The death toll is much lower than some other viruses because it is not spread as easily between people, but the fear factor is sky high. Rabies is like the quiet kid in the corner who somehow turns out to be the final boss. Ebola. Ebola is the kind of virus that makes headlines for a reason. It can cause severe bleeding, organ failure, and death, and outbreaks have terrified entire regions. The virus does not spread as easily as the flu or measles, but when it does spread, it can be brutal. The biggest outbreak in West Africa from 2014 to 2016 killed more than 11,000 people, and it showed the world how fast fear can travel when a dangerous virus shows up. Ebola also reminds us that a virus does not need to infect millions to be terrifying. Sometimes, it just needs to be cruel, fast, and hard to control. That is enough to make every hospital in the area go into full panic mode. Marburg. Marburg is like Ebola's equally nasty cousin that does not get enough attention. It can cause severe fever, bleeding, and organ failure too, and it belongs to the same family of viruses. Outbreaks have been smaller than Ebola overall, but the disease can be very deadly. Some outbreaks have had death rates that were extremely high, depending on the strain and the response time. Most people have never heard of Marburg, which is honestly a little rude, because this virus is definitely not playing around. It is one of those names that sounds like a fake boss in a video game, but no, it is very real and very serious. Hantavirus. Hantavirus deserves a seat at the table because it has one of the most cursed origin stories. It usually spreads through contact with rodents or their waste, which is already enough to ruin your day. Some types can cause serious lung disease, and others can attack the kidneys. Certain outbreaks have had very high death rates, especially when people did not get care fast enough. The reason this virus feels extra creepy is that it can start with simple symptoms that look like a bad cold, and then it can go from 0 to disaster. It is a reminder that the natural world is full of tiny things that do not care about your plans, your job, or your clean kitchen. Measles. Measles sounds harmless to some people because they hear the name and think, isn't that just a childhood rash? No, absolutely not. Measles is one of the most contagious viruses in the world, and before vaccines, it killed millions of children over time. Even now, it can still be deadly, especially for young kids or people who are not protected. It spreads through the air so well that one sick person can infect a lot of others very quickly. The virus also weakens the body's immune memory, which means it can leave people more vulnerable to other infections later. That is a seriously bad combo. Measles is the kind of virus that acts small but hits like a truck. Polio. Polio is one of those viruses that made parents deeply afraid for generations. It mainly attacked children, and in serious cases, it could cause paralysis, especially in the legs. Some people who survived were left with lifelong problems. Before the vaccine, outbreaks were a huge fear every summer, and many families lived with the stress of not knowing who would get hit next. Polio did not always kill, but it could change a life in one shot. And that is its own kind of cruelty. Thanks to vaccines, most of the world has pushed polio close to extinction. That is huge, because this virus used to be one of the most feared names on the planet. And now, humanity is basically saying, yeah, sit down.
SARS. SARS showed up in the early 2000s and made the world pay attention to a new kind of danger. It spread through close contact and caused severe breathing problems in many patients. It did not infect as many people as some other viruses on this list, but it was serious enough to scare governments, hospitals, and entire cities. The outbreak was eventually stopped, which is one reason SARS became such an important lesson. It taught scientists and governments that a virus can move from a local problem to a global alarm very fast. In other words, it was the warning siren before the next big wave. MERS. MERS is another coronavirus, and it caused outbreaks mostly in the Middle East. It can lead to very serious breathing illness, and the death rate has been high compared with many other viruses. It does not spread as easily from person to person as some other viruses, but when people do get infected, it can be very dangerous. A lot of the early cases were linked to camels, which is one of those facts that sounds fake until you check it twice. MERS never turned into a huge worldwide pandemic like COVID, but it still matters because it showed that coronaviruses can keep surprising us in the worst ways. COVID-19. Then came COVID-19, and suddenly the whole world learned what it feels like when a virus turns life upside down. It spread fast, shut down schools and businesses, changed travel, and made masks part of normal life for a long time. By official counts, millions of people died. And the real number may be even higher when you count extra deaths linked to the pandemic. What made COVID so powerful was not just the virus itself, but how easily it moved through people who felt fine at first. That is the sneaky part. A person could look normal, sound normal, and still pass it on. That made it spread like gossip in a school hallway. Fast, messy, and impossible to ignore. Dengue. Dengue does not always get the same scary movie treatment as Ebola or Rabies, but it is one of the biggest viral threats on Earth. It is spread by mosquitoes, and in many warm parts of the world, it causes huge outbreaks. Some people get a bad fever and joint pain, while others get a severe form that can become life-threatening. The wild part is that billions of people live in places where dengue can spread, so the risk is enormous. It is a perfect example of how a tiny mosquito can act like the worst delivery service in history. You do not even see the problem coming, and then, boom, your body is in a fight it did not ask for. Yellow fever. Yellow fever has a long and nasty history. It is spread by mosquitoes too, and in severe cases, it can cause bleeding, liver failure, and death. Before vaccines and better public health systems, it caused major outbreaks in cities and ports. It even changed history in some places because travelers and workers were afraid to go where the virus was active. The name sounds almost pretty, but the disease itself was anything but. This virus is proof that nature loves fake advertising. The label sounds calm, but the reality is very much not calm. If you liked the video, can you subscribe, please?